This week on the show, we sat down with John Mark Gurney to talk about modernizing FreeBSD's IPSEC stack. We also learn what he's adding, what needs to be fixed, and how we'll all benefit from the changes. As always, we're going to have answers to your emails and all this week's news here on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 61, the IPSECond Wind, recorded October 29th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
We're glad to have you guys with us this week on the eve of BSD Now. I know me and Alan will be flying out in a couple days.
Yes, so Meet BSD.
Again. Meet BSD. Wow.
Yeah.
It's been a long morning already. But yeah. So Meet BSD coming up in a couple days. So hope to see you guys out there.
Yes.
Come on, say hi. That would be fantastic.
Indeed.
But we do have some headlines to get into, of course, today right away. So speaking of conferences, so I guess there was a BSD panel held at a Phoenix Linux users group recently, and we have a link to the YouTube video where you can go ahead and watch that.
Yeah,
but,
when I heard of this, I was like, BSD stuff at the Phoenix Linux users group. I wonder if Kevin went to that. And there's Kevin.
Right. Sure. But that's a really good idea, though. I guess they had, Kevin, one FreeBSD user and one OpenBSD. Who is the OpenBSD user?
Doesn't say. Oh, Darren Chandler.
Okay. So, and of course, they answered questions from the organizer and from people in the audience, which is a great way to introduce people to BSD.
For about an hour, so they had lots of questions, which is the best part, I guess.
That's fantastic, but they covered all kinds of stuff from firewalls to file systems, different development models, licenses, philosophies behind the reasons why the different BSDs exist.
Yes,
so that's good stuff.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of interest in BSD specifically for file systems and firewalls. The biggest two ways that people get into BSD in the first place are FreeNAS and pfSense.
Yep. So this is fantastic, but this is good having real-world examples of things that potential switchers are curious to know about.
Yes.
And that's good for us to put the challenge out to some of our listeners, too. If you have a lug in your area and you are your local FreeBSD or BSD expert, you should consider going out to one. Yep. Do a special BSD day where you guys just answer questions about it and kind of give people some real-world experience.
A lot of times, the Linux people have very strange misconceptions about BSD. And just being able to answer their questions makes them feel much more comfortable about it.
Definitely. So, of course, they close the conference by concluding that diversity is always better. So even if you do have a lot of Linux boxes, putting a few BSD ones in the mix is a good idea. Isn't that what VeriSign does, too?
Yep, VeriSign.
The conference, they talked about that.
Yeah, part of the reason they got into FreeBSD is they wanted to have their infrastructure not be only Linux. So they actually run a third of the servers run FreeBSD, a third Linux, and a third Solaris. And they run different DNS server applications on them as well, so that any one thing going wrong is only going to affect a third of their capacity.
Oh, that's very cool. So props to you guys for going out and doing that. We challenge others to do the same. That just seems like a great way to answer a lot of questions. And having that face-to-face time, and especially because a lot of Linux users maybe won't come out to Meet BSD or BSD can right away, but this would be their first opportunity to talk to somebody who is a BSD user.
Cool.
Okay, well, moving on, we have a Book of PF. A signed copy is up for auction. Wow, that's cool. So we get the links here, but Peter Hanstein, who we've had on the show in previous episode, is auctioning off his first signed copy of the new Book of PF. So you'll want to get that definitely if you do any firewall stuff. But all the profits from the sale are going to go to the OpenBSD Foundation, a worthy cause. And the updated edition of the book is going to include all the latest PF syntax changes, but also provides examples for FreeBSD's and NetBSD's versions of PF as well, which still use Alt-Q among some of the other differences. Yep. So that's sounds like a very comprehensive book.
Yeah. And,
do you have a copy of this one yet, Alan?
No, I have the slightly older one, I think. But it's especially now that they've diverged so much, he complains a little bit about having to write basically 2 books about it. But it does mean that if you pick up the book, it's going to work for both, and that
it's relevant to your platform of choice.
Exactly. And
so cool.
Apparently, there's an interesting little competition going on. Other big BSD book author Michael W. Lucas has challenged Peter to raise more for the OpenBSD Foundation than Michael raised for the FreeBSD Foundation with his last book selling. And so it'll be interesting to see who can win.
Well, TJ says here to pause the episode and go bid on it, but I say just right-click, open a new tab, and do it that way. But
this is live. You can't pause live.
Yeah. Don't pause this live. That's not so.
That doesn't actually work.
Yes, definitely go bid on that though. A worthy cause, and supporting any of the BSD foundations is always a good thing. And you're getting an awesome book too. So it's a.
Speaking of BSD foundations,
definitely. So the FreeBSD Foundation, as you guys have heard us talk about many times, of course, they sponsored a lot of people to go to EuroBSDCon this year, and they came back with a nice trip report. They also sponsored 4 other developers to go. So the foundation says they were there to find out what people are working on, what kind of help they could use from the foundation, feedback on what can be done to support the FreeBSD project and community, and what features and functions people want supported in FreeBSD.
Yep.
So definitely want to check out this link. But they also have a second report from Camille Kazundra. I think I'm possibly mangling that. But anywho, you can go ahead and read their report on what their trip experience was like. And as well, I guess they raised $2,000 at the conference.
Yeah, which is fantastic. A lot. Because, I've seen the other reports from, they go to a Linux conference and they raise like $100 or whatever.
Yeah. That's a lot of money, especially, conferences. People just have some small bills.
Yeah, I guess, I imagine.
A booth.
On the last day, everybody's getting rid of their foreign currency.
Yeah. I admit I have done that a few times.
Yep.
Well, I'm not bringing this $5 whatever thing this is back.
Yep.
So. Well, cool.
But
that's good work, guys. And
they talk about all the different people from the foundation that were at the conference, because there were quite a few of them.
There was.
I guess it was Kirk was there, Ed,
Deb.
George, Hiroki, Deb, and Erwin. That was quite a number of people there.
I know a few of them are going to be out at Meet BSD, so we'll see who ends up being there in a couple days. So, of course, if you're going to be at that, come on and say hi to the guys at the foundation. I'm sure they'll be able to take donations there as well.
Yes.
So keep that in mind.
They also mentioned that the FreeBSD Foundation helped Google provide the Women Computer Scientists Scholarship System, Women in Tech or whatever they call that, from Google, and got some more people, especially researchers and stuff, to get to come out to the conference.
Nice.
When you're in academia, you don't really have a travel budget like you do when you are working for a company to get sent to a conference. And so the foundation and Google worked together to make sure that more people could come.
Very cool. Okay. Well, next up, this story is a little different. I mean, it's obviously a good story, but we're going to do it a couple days early because we're actually going to be out at Meet BSD next week.
Yes.
But we're going to be letting you know about OpenBSD 5.6 being released. But again, since we're doing this early, it will be released while we're gone.
So it's this Saturday, is it?
Yeah, November 1st. So this Saturday. So we just want to make sure we mention it ahead of time because
we'll
you might
be busy
watching this.
And next week's episode is pre-recorded because we won't be home in time. So
definitely. So again, continuing with their always on time 6-month release cycle, the OpenBSD team will be releasing 5.6 this Saturday, the 1st. Among some of the notables, it includes support for new hardware, lots of driver updates. We got network stack improvements, SMP in particular, and some new security features. 5.6 is also the first formal release with LibreSSL, which is, of course, their fork of OpenSSL, which we have discussed at length here. And a lot of ports of theirs have been fixed to work with it as well. So this is a pretty cool way to get your hands on some really new good stuff that came out of that whole OpenSSL debacle.
Seems they've also enhanced the hibernation support that OpenBSD has, so you can actually hibernate to your fully encrypted file system. So that, to resume from hibernation, you need the right password to decrypt your hibernated session, which is something a lot of other operating systems' hibernation feature doesn't actually provide.
I don't think we need that in FreeBSD.
We don't have hibernation at all, so
Right? Let's get hibernation first, but then yes, we'd like to have that as well.
The other interesting thing is that because this is OpenBSD, 5.6, in addition to a giant list of new features, has a list of removed features, including AltQ. AltQ is a plugin system for traffic shaping, and it allowed a bunch of different algorithms to be used. Because at the time, nobody knew which algorithm was going to be best. So for research purposes, they made it pluggable and had all. But it turns out that we've learned that one of them works best in every case. And so instead of having this complex pluggable system, we are just going to use that algorithm directly, and it simplifies configuration. So they've thrown Alt Q out, and they just have new Q.
Nice.
They got rid of.
Like they've also said goodbye to Kerberos as well.
Links, which you can still get from ports if you want it. I'm not sure that it was that useful having that in the base system. They got rid of Bluetooth, which that's probably just annoying anyway. TCP wrappers. That's kind of an interesting one to get rid of. I can understand why they might, but at the same time, I still use that for a couple things. And they removed Apache, which was replaced with Nginx, which is, or actually, yes, this they say this will be a transitional release with a lot of services. They're moving from SendMail to OpenSMTBD, and from Nginx to HTTPD. So they're removing Apache because in the previous release they transitioned from Apache to Nginx. In the next release, they will transition from Nginx to
and then remove Nginx in favor of HTTPD. Well, cool. And also from bind to unbound as well. And we've had some episodes talking about some of the transitional things like HTTPD and stuff. So you want to refer back to those if you're interested in hearing what those are all about. Let's see. So SendMail, Nginx, and bind will be gone in the next release as well. So you either need to migrate to the new stuff between now and then or switch to the port version. So just a heads up on that. And as usual, when the OpenBSD guys do a release, they get their own songs and artwork for them. And
that's
so
something we don't really do.
That, right? And the theme this time was a Libra SSL for obvious reasons. So that's pretty cool. And we have a link to the full changelog, which is quite huge. So take a look at that if you're interested in picking up this upgrade over the weekend. And, of course, pick up a shirt or a CD to support their efforts. This is a good cause.
Speaking of the CD set, I have here pictures of what the case and everything looks like. Very fancy. I love the carp with the checklist there. Many different
I'm
fish.
Clicking to open them up here and look as well.
Lots of interesting fish artwork.
That's pretty cool.
That is quite fancy.
Yes, so you need to have a set of those on your shelf. That's just awesome to have.
It's just to have the artwork and stuff, You can always download stuff. But that's also the primary source of income for the OpenBSD Foundation is selling these CD sets. So, I picked up mine, even though I've actually never used the CDs because I just download the ISOs off the website or the FTP server. But, it is nice to support them by grabbing that CD set. And, as we've shown in the past, it's 10 years from now, it'll be cool to have a shelf full of these.
It will be.
Everybody was going gaga over that
history.
That picture of the guy sending of all his old FreeBSD 2, 3, and 4 CD sets. And that could be you in the future if you grab all your OpenBSD versions and keep them.
Very nice. So of course we want to mention after your installation or upgrade in this case, don't forget to head over to their errata page and apply any patches which are listed there as well. Just make sure you're all up to snuff on everything. Well, cool. Well, of course, we want to mention now at this time the sponsor for the show this week, which first one we're going to mention is Tarsnap. So tarsnap.com/BSDNow is the URL, and you'll definitely want to go there and start setting up your backups if you're not doing ones already. And we also want to mention, of course, since we've talked a lot about OpenBSD today, that it is in the OpenBSD ports and it's in NetBSD's package source as well. So
there for every version
no
of
excuse.
BSD.
Yeah, no excuse not to be doing backups. It's available and it is easy to use, just as easy on all the platforms. So
and
heck, I think he's even got a Sigwin version for Windows.
He does. So even if you need to back up files on Windows, if you're okay with the command line, you're good to go.
Yeah. So no excuse not to be doing backups. You got to be doing them. And of course, if you're going to do them, you want them to be encrypted so that you don't have to trust that the guy on the opposite end isn't trolling through your files and seeing what you got. So again, URL tarsnap.com/BSDNow. Let them know that we sent you, and we would appreciate that.
It's prepaid or pay as you go, so you only there's no unexpected bills. You just put money in and use it the service until you run out, and then you put in more money. So you have complete control over what your bill is going to be, which makes it very different than every other cloud service ever.
That is true. This week, we're joined now by John Mark Gurney, FreeBSD consultant. Glad to have you with us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
and we're all enjoying EuroBSDCon here, so let's get right into the questions. First up, how did you first get involved in BSD? What brought you here?
So it's kind of an interesting story. When I was a freshman in high school, my classmate of mine, he actually installed AUX on an SE30. Mm-hmm. So this was way back in the early 90s, and so I got some experience with that, and then also a friend of mine also installed Unixware, and then I had been on the internet, set up a web server under MS-DOS, crazy stuff back then. Mm-hmm. And finally I had been doing C programming, and I heard about there was a free GCC, and there were various operating systems like Slackware. Sure. And other stuff, and so I did some research, and I had three choices that upon my research. It was either Slackware, NetBSD, or FreeBSD. Sadly, back in like 94 timeframe, NetBSD's installation instructions were just horrendous, and I had no real Unix experience, so sadly that went out of the way. The other problem was Slackware required you to put stuff in specific directories, and my only way to download files off the internet was dialing into a VAX that had Telnet access, that I would Telnet into a Gopher server that had SC installed. So being able to download files into directories was very problematic. Well, FreeBSD installation, as Jordan pointed out at the wonderful keynote, was like 230 kilobyte blocks that you just put in the root of the directory, and away you went. So I installed FreeBSD 1151 back somewhere in 94, which actually makes it my around 20-year anniversary of using FreeBSD. So yeah, and then I've been using FreeBSD to a certain extent for a very long time now.
That's very cool. So what's the story behind you actually becoming a developer?
So the funny part is partly I knew I was doing this interview, so I did a little bit of research, and I looked at some of my old bugs, and so I was doing I was a student in high school. I had lots of free time, so I was running across random bugs. I mean, there were plenty of them back then, and so I had done added FISC, the ability to specify a file system with FISC, so FISC/user, and
instead of having to put /dev/whatever.
Yeah, I forget what release that went in, but I had heard that Linux had that feature, but FreeBSD didn't, and turns out it was 5, 10, 15 line patch, because we already had a library to read at CSDAV. It was amazingly simple. Nobody had done it, but I had the time, so I kept on submitting various fixes for utilities and man pages and then other stuff. And then after a few years, Jorg, it was like, if you keep writing man pages and helping, we might have to threaten you with a commit bit.
That's right.
That's
how we punish people. Right?
Yes. So I was like, ooh, and I was still in my teenage years, so I was like, ooh, I'm going to commit bit. What evil can I wreck? But so I ended up writing a few SCSI man pages, and then it was like send off a snarky comments like, oh, here's some man pages. Do I get my commit bit now? And then silence for a day. I'm like, uh-oh, did I say something wrong? And then a day later, I got an email saying, you got your commit bit. And so this was in early 97 that I got my bit. So
very cool. So is there a background behind this new IPSEC project, and what's this all about?
So yeah, the IPSEC project was primarily started by Jim Thompson of Netgate, and they make the pfSense firewall and stuff, and so with that, he's interested in supporting VPNs and other stuff. But so there's new faster modes, with modern processors having AES and I instructions. We can now do things faster, and so the Open Crypto framework in FreeBSD doesn't support these additional modes like AES counter for some reason, even though that mode's been around for practically ever. We don't have counter, and we also but GCM, which is relatively newer, we didn't have that either. And the ASNI instructions also include another set of instructions, PCL mul QDQ. Yes, it's a mouthful, but it helps doing the GCM part, and so you can actually make that timing resistant, side channel resistant, using those instructions, and do very good. And so he wants to be able to do things like 10 gigabit on a relatively cheap commodity hardware for his BFSense project. So he got together with the foundation to sponsor the project for me.
Right. So that normally, like, sending 10 gigabits over a network card is already kind of an intensive job, but if you want to encrypt it all as well, then it was
exactly
just saturating the CPU.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, the software crypto, you're lucky if you're getting a few hundred megabytes per second, but with 10 gig, you need a gigabyte per second. And yes, you do have multiple cores, but those cores need to be doing other stuff than just doing.
Yeah, some of them have to be driving the NIC and generating the traffic in the first place.
TCP framing, if you're doing that as opposed to routing. So every little bit you can save in CPU is a huge win.
I guess even with a VPN, you end up having to decrypt and encrypt
depends upon which way. Usually you decrypt incoming packets and encrypt outgoing, but depends upon the configuration. So
and so what was wrong with the way FreeBSD was doing it before, or was there anything wrong, or is it just had aged, or? So
the primary thing, we didn't have the additional modes, so we did that. Another part of my project was also to look at some of the other things that we had. I've tried to import some of the latest OpenBSD, OpenCrypto stuff, but even that, the thing is this was designed back in around 2000 or so, and software development changes like every few years. We learn so much more about it, and a lot of the stuff that they wanted to be able to do with it just doesn't make sense anymore these days. Like one of the features that they wanted to do is like, we can automatically load balance between multiple cards and other stuff, and very few people have that. I don't think even OpenBSD or NetBSD has that feature to load balance or switch sessions between that. So it's really right now just a crypto framework, and there's a lot of extra knobs that just make it complicated to maintain.
So did you clean those up, or just?
So right now, I haven't done too much cleanup there. I did actually do some research, and there's like this FREL flag that nobody implements, and one of the drivers actually, like, if FREL is bit, do something else, do the exact same thing that I did. It's like,
what's the point?
Exactly. I even checked NetBSD and OpenBSD. None of them were using this flag either. So it's like, okay, delete from the man page. We don't need that anymore.
So what are some of the new things you're going to be adding?
So the initial ASNI implementation was not handling some of the blocking that it needs to. Is operating on linear buffer, which, and believe it or not, this impacts performance having to copy data around. Especially, I haven't measured it on IPSEC yet, but with IPSEC, everything gets passed in on an MBUF, and so then the MBUF could be multiple segmented, and now you have to copy it into a linear frame buffer. So hopefully I'll do that. And I've been also talking with Paul about various improvements that we can make, because he uses that heavily in his own systems that he deploys as part of wheel systems.
Okay. What are some of the advantages of the new modes, or what are the differences even just between regular AES that you would use in CTR and GCM?
So the original AES modes that we had were CBC, and I forget if there was any other AES modes off the top of my head. But one of the big problems is that when you do encrypt with CBC, you cannot pipeline the mode. The new AES instructions, you can actually pipeline them to get massive performance, but with CBC encrypt, you can't do that.
Because each block requires data from the last block.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas the other mode, you can use all your processors that way.
But the funny part is CBC decrypt, since you do everything backwards, you don't have that data dependency. But with counter, you no longer have that, because now you encrypt a counter and then you XOR it onto the plain text, which is the way you do that. And also the ASGCM uses the AES counter mode internally. Also, there's GCM, so that's AES counter. AES GCM is what is called, also known as an AEAD mode, authenticated encryption with associated data. And so this allows to provide an additional tag that authenticates that the ciphertext hasn't been maliciously manipulated in transit and stuff. And so this will combine, and you can effectively do this as one step, which increases performance stuff.
Cool.
So is there a possibility of, say, Cha-Cha 20 or Poly 1305 being added, or is there like a standard you follow in regard to what's allowed?
So there really isn't any. The standards that I follow are basically the RFCs. Once right now, Cha-Cha 20, Poly 1305 are right now in the draft stages.
Sure.
So I did a little bit of research, and DJB has done some great. Release some code. He also has various SSE implementations to make the performance even better and stuff. And so I'm looking at that right now. They're in draft stages, so once they standardize, hopefully we'll get them in. Because they're good protocols, and they're going to be necessary because perform really well in software. So like Android devices that don't necessarily have the AS instructions will be able to benefit from that. Yeah.
Very cool.
Which parts are you actually importing from OpenBSD as opposed to writing yourself? And is there any coordination between them and you?
So this can get a little bit technical, but there's an xform.c file that handles all the software crypto, and so I kind of looked at that, integrated some of the code from that, and took a look at that. And but partly because of this project focusing on performance, I actually ended up writing a new GCM software algorithm that would have much better performance from OpenBSD. And I haven't talked to them about this yet, but I plan on telling. There's even the one that they have is side channel resistant because it does it the slow way, but there's slight modifications you can make to actually improve their performance. So I'm going to inform them of that, and I definitely want to see more collaboration on stuff because crypto is a difficult subject to get right, and having 5 different implementations isn't good because that means when we find a bug, we have to fix it in all 5 or whatever. Yeah.
Right, and
more eyes looking at it can only be a good thing.
There's not enough people to maintain all 5, so if we could just have 2 or 3 instead.
Yeah.
And so, how close is their open crypto to ours?
It's very close. I didn't pull in all of their changes. There's some things that didn't quite apply for us and other stuff, but I was quite amazed that you look at the code and you definitely know that they were related and not very far
apart. Close enough that it's easy to push code back and forth?
Decently. One of the disadvantages is, if I remember correctly, OpenBSD doesn't have all the locking that FreeBSD does for SMP, so that makes things a little bit difficult, but luckily most of the data locking is just a few lines there, so it doesn't cause too much problems.
Cool. So why would somebody choose to use IPSEC over something like OpenVPN or an SSH tunnel?
That is sometimes IPSEC is more well known for necessarily backhauls stuff. You have 2 data sites that you just want to do. Cisco, their implementation, or like OpenVPN is often more targeted for desktop users for a single device, and like Cisco underlying technology is actually IPSEC. They just use like UDP or whatever to do the transmit the key exchange and other stuff, which is slightly different than the way the traditional IPSEC does. So in those cases, you'll still see some, but yeah, IPSEC and all they're slightly different, but they really all do the exact same thing. Encrypt your bits from one location to the other and make sure they're good.
IPSEC's is standard, so it gives you more interoperability with other hardware, but some of the other times something like an SSH channel is easier to set up, but obviously when you don't control the other end, you have to have something that's compatible and standardized.
And also like IPSEC doesn't do NAT traversal very well. There are some standards in order to help that. I actually happen to use an SSH tunnel for pretty much all of my work. I've just been looked at deploying OpenVPN or something from my laptop to there, but at the same time, the SSH tunnel just works. I don't have to open another.
SSHD is already running.
Exactly. I don't have to open another port. Don't have to be running another service that could have vulnerabilities. Smaller attack surface.
Makes sense.
So, what other FreeBSD features can we blame you for?
Well, that gets a little bit complicated. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Fisk bug, which
that's a good one.
But it's been almost 15 years ago. Jonathan Lemon did KQ work for FreeBSD, and when I saw that, I knew with like the C10K problem, which is now more like a C1 million problem.
Sure.
Back then, I knew KQ was just the way it worked and the event notification, and not having to like re-enter and re-pull all 10,000 file descriptors and stuff. It was going to make a huge improvement. So back in I think it was like 2006, my company at the time, Encircle, they sponsored me. They used FreeBSD in their appliances, and they sponsored me to lock KQ because we had already done the SMP project.
Sure.
A lot of systems had been locked, but if KQ didn't get locked, it was going to have to be deleted. So that's one of the more major other projects this year. I'm trying to think if there's another one. I've touched a lot of different systems, written a number of man pages and stuff. So
cool. So, anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up here?
No. I have heard from a number of people that finding consultants in FreeBSD can be hard, but I'm actually available for consulting. I know there's another. I think it was. XMJ just recently posted to FreeBSD jobs, so there are consultants out there, and there's.
Yeah. If your company uses FreeBSD in some way and is having a problem or needs someone to look at something, then there are people available.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I actually got a FreeBSD contract over Twitter. Surprisingly, social media even brings in the jobs. So
Cool.
Yeah, there's a FreeBSD jobs.
There's
Twitter
a Twitter account that reposts stuff that goes to the mailing list so that it gets out to the people that wouldn't necessarily see the mailing list.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
There's a LinkedIn group as well.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I need to be better at checking those. I'm better at checking Twitter than I am at LinkedIn, but
like most of us. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with us this week. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and we're back, and it's time to start getting into the news roundup. But before we do that, of course, we want to mention the other sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems, and the URL for that, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you. And it looks like they just got back from sending a few folks. Drew and Ken, Drew Levine and Ken, my brother, went out to Ohio Linux Fest. So we have a link to some of the photos from what the conference looked like out there. So I don't know if you have those up on the screen, Alan, if you want to scrap
I have both Ken's write-up about it and the pictures. You can see here. There's Ken giving his talk about Lumina, Drew giving her talk about the new FreeNAS 9.3, which should be coming out soon, right? That's the one that's on the way. And also showing the vendor floor. As you can see, even though it's a Linux conference, lots of people walking around wearing little devil horns. They had a massive pile of those.
Things we get rid of.
Yes. Well, sometimes, it seems like they don't ever have enough, but this time they definitely didn't have that problem. They have a nice big heap of them.
Yep. Hey, don't let the heap fool you. I mean, that could have been gone.
That does disappear pretty quick.
In the morning. Just depends on when the photo was taken.
Yep. And there's the FreeBSD Foundation / FreeNAS table with Marty from IX was also there to talk to people about FreeNAS. And then if you look closely, you can also see a bunch of other people from Jupiter Broadcasting because they had a booth there as well.
Nice.
And
you'll definitely want to check that out. So if you were in the Ohio area, that's what you could have been at. So try and make it out next year. I mean, even though it's a Linux conference, a lot of the Linux conferences, we have a BSD booth there. Yep. Usually Drew will be there and maybe a couple of people from IX.
Yes. If you check out IX's front page, they have a little section where they tell you where they're going to be next. And it's always only a week away.
That's right. That's right. I feel sorry sometimes for Drew.
Yes, I saw her message on
travels a lot
on social network earlier. It's like, I'm going to be home for 3 days, woo, in a row.
That's awesome.
It's like, wow, that's some time off for you.
Yeah, but I mean, a company like IX Systems that does that, I mean, they really do support the BSDs and support it. But they put their money where their mouth is too. I mean,
right,
paying
and
people to go and do these things.
It's not just that they're yes, they employ a lot of developers and actually work on FreeBSD, but they also support the community by having these events and hosting their own, right? Meet BSD. We're going there this weekend. And, they make sure that happens because they know how valuable that is to the community, Now, the better community makes better software, but at the same time, it's just a step that a lot of companies wouldn't bother to take.
Definitely. And since they do employ those developers, they are really experienced, obviously, at BSD, and aren't just going to be salespeople you talk to. These are
Exactly.
engineers who understand what your problems are and how we can best fix them. What kind of solutions will work best in your case.
Exactly. When you buy when you buy your hardware from them, you know that it's going to work with BSD because they will have tested it before they sold it to you to make sure. And if there ever is a problem, they're not going to be like, "Oh, you're using FreeBSD? Sorry, we don't support that." It's going to be like, "Oh, yeah, we know exactly what's going on here. We will help you right away."
Definitely. So again, that URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you. That would be fantastic if you would do so. And definitely try and make it out to Meet BSD as well
exactly.
this weekend.
It's this weekend, so you better hurry up.
Yeah, and we know there's a lot of developers who listen out in the Bay Area, so
yes,
no
I
excuse.
see.
Please try and make it to at least one of the days.
I saw even people in the FreeBSD chat room today saying, "Oh, I should register." I'm like, "Yes, you should. Hurry up."
Yeah.
The conference organizers are like, "We ordered the T-shirts already, and more people keep signing up. We need more T-shirts."
That's right.
It always happens that way.
But it'll be good to see you guys out there. Me and Alan will both be there, so come on by and say hi. We'd love to talk to you.
We're also going to try to do some live stuff from there, so definitely watch our Twitter account and check out the BSD Now website, as we might be streaming randomly on and off throughout the day. And no developer is safe. We are going to corner as many of them as we can.
Definitely. So look forward to seeing you guys out there. So again, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Fill out the form. Let them go ahead and download the guide to tell you about how to purchase a server for open source, what you need to know from your upstream vendor, good questions to ask, and how to talk to management and so forth.
Yep.
And
also talks about all the reasons why IX is better, including the burn-in test, the QA process, the hands-on support, etc.
Definitely. Okay, well, let's go right into the news roundup. So first up, little Dragonfly BSD news. We got Clang information. So as you guys, if you've been following for a while, FreeBSD got rid of GCC in 10.0, and we now use Clang on i386 and AMD 64 pretty much exclusively. Some Dragonfly developers are considering migrating over now as well. And one of them is actually doing the work to make the OS more Clang friendly. So this is pretty cool. We, of course, would love to see BSD switch to Clang LLVM eventually. It's a lot more modern than the old GCC that most of them were using.
And that's because of the license change on GCC. And even with the newer GCC, Clang has such nicer error messages and better static analysis and so on.
Definitely.
But actually, it looks like... Dragonfly already actually ships with GCC 4.7, the newer one. What they're doing is getting rid of the old GCC 4.4 in favor of Clang. So instead of having the old and new GCC, they'll have a modern-ish GCC and the Clang, which will give people the better option and kind of, GCC works and you can use it, but we're moving towards Clang because that's where the future is going to be.
Yes, definitely. I've enjoyed the, working with Clang. It's just been easier for
Well,
us with what we do.
I wrote my first C program ever over the weekend, and having Clang and those nice error messages with the colors and it points an arrow and says, you need to put an ampersand here to fix this. It's like, oh, nice. Thanks, because I would have never realized what that error message meant without that. Yeah, Clang
definitely helps the debugging
stuff.
Cool. Okay, well, next up, integer overflow detection for free.
Yes.
Oh, this is cool. So we got a link to a blog post here, but one of the less obvious features in the new OpenBSD 5.6, hitting soon, is a new libc function. Let's see, relocate array. It's a replacement function for relock that provides integer overflow detection at basically no extra cost. How cool is that?
So the normal call is malloc, and that allocates a chunk of memory. And then if you need to change the size of that, you can use realloc. The problem is you have to know how much you want to grow it by. And the problem is that calculating that size can get quite hard to do. And you have to worry about overflows and all this other stuff. And so back in 2006, Ray wrote, he said, unfortunately, there's no safe replacement for realloc. And to prevent overflow, he wrote this giant chunk of code. And it's like having to do that every time you want to expand an array is kind of ridiculous. And so basically putting this into a new function in libc means it is available for everybody.
That's cool. I guess Theo and a few of the other developers over there have already started a mass audit of their entire source tree, replacing many instances with this new feature. So that is really cool. And
There's a
we'll
bunch
mention
of
too,
things in C where whole code bases would be nice if, no one ever
we just
used
started
stir-toke
fixing some
ever
of these.
again.
And OpenBSD's explicit B0 was actually imported into FreeBSD.
Yes.
So we'll put out the call. Maybe somebody should port this over as well.
Yes.
This could come in handy.
Yeah, like being in FreeBSD's libc would be quite useful. And if it gets into everybody's libc, then that means that
Just
everybody
better
can
for
start
everyone.
using it and not have to have a backup wrapper version and so on.
Cool. Okay, so the Switching from Linux blog has some new news. So, listener of this show has started a new blog series detailing his experiences in switching over to BSD from Linux. So, I guess he's been using Linux for some 10 years and decided to give BSD a try after listening to our show, which is awesome, by the way. Thank you. He said so far he's put up a few posts about his initial thoughts, some of the documentation he's going through, and it's an experiment so far. And it's going to be an ongoing series. So, of course, you'll want to check on that frequently, and we will, of course, monitor it and pass that along as well. So at what point is he at now? Let's see. He said he's reading The Absolute FreeBSD by Michael W. Lucas, which is a good place to start.
Yep. He mentions that that's a bit dated. Newer versions are actually being worked on 3,000 words a day right now. So that will be solved shortly.
I said he did some quick stuff with PCBSD. Of course, he mentions that PCBSD gives you a full-featured desktop in a few minutes, but rolling your own FreeBSD takes longer, and you'll learn a little more on the way, which is true.
But yeah, having PCBSD there, and then you can still do the manual stuff on top after, but just having PCB so that you have a working system does help a lot.
Definitely. Sometimes you just don't want to fiddle with X.
Well, when I was teaching FreeBSD as a server, and like second week we had them install X and like GNOME or Kitty or something and build the desktop. It's like if we could have just shown them PCBSD, they might have been a lot less afraid of the operating system to begin with. If they just installed PCBSD, everything worked, and then they did the labs because it's just FreeBSD underneath, so they could still do all the networking labs and making a DNS server or whatever. I think we might have convinced more of them that FreeBSD is actually cool, as opposed to they were just like, oh, it's a command line and yay kind of thing.
Yeah, this is more difficult and tedious, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, live and learn, I suppose. But yeah, that definitely is a good way to do it because, again, PCBSD is FreeBSD under the hood. Exactly. So you just open up a shell and do what you want to do. Okay, well, next up, we have a link to a YouTube video about running OwnCloud in a FreeNAS jail. This is pretty cool. So one of the most common emails we get is about running OwnCloud in FreeNAS. And now somebody has finally made a video about how to do that, and it's even jailed. So a member of the FreeNAS community has uploaded a video and a how-to on how to set it up with a light HTTPD as the web server backend. So if you're looking for an easy way to back up and sync your files, this is definitely something you want to take a look at.
Yeah, it has
very cool to have.
It has a nice sync client like Dropbox. You can just install it on your various desktops, including the Windows version, and the files just magically get synced between your computers. It's great if you have a desktop and a laptop and you want to keep all your files safe on your FreeNAS.
Definitely. So that is very cool. So check that out. Again, if you have any kind of FreeNAS deploys anywhere, this is a great way to have Dropbox-like functionality without actually using Dropbox.
Yeah, because it even has stuff to like let you view and edit your documents while they're in the OwnCloud via your browser, and it really does provide quite a bit of good stuff.
Okay, we're back. Let's go ahead and get right into some questions and comments from you guys out in the audience this week. So first up, we have a question from Ernau, I believe. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but asking about OwnCloud and HTTPS. So he says, hey guys, I've been a Linux user since 2000 and continue to use it on my laptops, but on my servers I have pfSense set up as my firewall router and FreeNAS for my storage. I've come to love the availability of jails and plugins. Plex Media Server is serving my media needs, and OwnCloud 7 helps me back up my files. Very cool. He said, I have made my own OwnCloud plugin available in a DMZ and it works great, but I'd like to set it up to always connect through HTTPS. I get confused when setting up certificates, saving them, and making them all available to the server. Even though I am comfortable with the command line, SSH, etc., I'm a nurse by profession, don't have too much time to hunt down answers on the interwebs. So thanks for your help and for the show. So I guess he's asking for a config script or recipe to force OwnCloud to go to HTTP.
Well, it sounds like what he needs to do is to either generate or buy an SSL certificate. Now, yeah, so if you make one yourself with some commands, the downside is every time you go to it, your browser will be like, hey, this isn't a valid certificate. Now, you can tell your browser to remember it, but if you're on a different browser, you get the same thing.
Gets a little annoying.
You can buy a certificate for $9 or $10 from most like domain name registrars, and that's per year. But that's the same cost or less than the domains are now, actually. But
Sure.
So you can just buy a valid SSL certificate if you want, but there's tools to just generate your own, and then you can just tell your browser to trust it, and you won't get the error every time. It's really not that hard. The process is a little involved, but the first thing you do is you generate what's called a certificate signing request, or CSR. And this is basically detailing about your web server, like what the address is going to be is the most important thing, because that's what has to match on an SSL certificate. Because the whole point of SSL is knowing that the website you're connecting to is actually the website that they say they are, right? So when you go to your bank, it's actually your bank, not some guy setting up a web server and pretending to be your bank.
Sure.
And so the certificate has the name of your website on it, like the URL. Just the host name part, but anyway. So you create this certificate signing request, and then normally you go to a domain name registrar or whoever sells your SSL certificates, give them the CSR, prove that you own the domain by clicking a link or whatever, and they will send you back the certificate. Or you can do self-signed, where another OpenSSL command, and you can make up a certificate authority that's assigned, that's signed by itself, and then that certificate authority can then sign your web service certificate. Apache and so on always include a tool to do that quickly for yourself. So,
I'm not sure which.
I guess we could do a tutorial on that coming up or something. It's
which web server he's using on this
right.
as well.
It sounds like he's probably using the OwnCloud plugin for FreeNAS, and I'm not sure which one it uses.
I don't know off the top of my head either.
I don't know very much.
I guess
about,
would be Nginx,
right.
But
I don't know very much about the OwnCloud or the FreeNAS plugin system. But it seems like they could probably just make SSL an option, and it will just auto-generate a certificate or something. Seems like they could do a quick scripted system for that. Maybe we can talk to somebody about that at MeetBSD.
We'll prod them while we're at MeetBSD. Yes.
And
okay.
So maybe the next version of the plugin will just have an SSL only checkbox, and your problem is solved.
Yeah, it's done. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, that will be something we'll pass along. And, if we do a tutorial, of course, keep listening to the show. We'll see if we can get that in at some point.
Exactly. So the next question is from David, and it says the cloud, which just makes me shake my head. It says he's been following the BSD community for years, and he's always been tempted by OpenBSD, playing with it on and off, and getting a few books and so on. He's starting a new project that demands the best security he can give, and he finds a perfect excuse to give in to his temptation, leave his Linux comfort zone, and go with OpenBSD. Skipping over the cloud versus security discussion, I'd really like to hear what you guys talk about BSD in the cloud, BSD in particular. Well, that's kind of hard considering that what is the cloud? Are you talking about a virtualized server? Because that's not really the cloud. But anyway, he says, I realize that most KVM-based cloud providers can install my own OS with boot media, and I've found a handful of BSD-friendly providers with OpenBSD images to start with. However, availability just isn't enough for me. I not only feel good when I purchase from smaller, but you might say community-oriented vendors, but the product and customer support is usually superior. Tarsnap is a perfect example. You just can't beat jumping into the Tarsnap IRC channel and talking to Colin directly. And as far as products, there's no comparison. He says, I've been able to find some dated threads on Undeadly and other places and some great feedback from the community on OpenBSD virtual private servers, but I feel like I still have yet to uncover the place to get his VPS to BSD.
Nice. And yes, he did put the dot there, so that's cool.
There's a couple of, if you really want it to be the cloud, what you would do is get one at more than one different provider and then have some redundancy set up so that you're syncing the files between them so that if one of them does go down or something, your stuff stays up. And that's basically what makes it the cloud, right? One VPS is just a virtual server. The whole point of the cloud is that, you have these separated availability zones so that if anything happens to one, your stuff can stay up because it exists over here as well. as far as the best place to get a VPS, I don't really know. But I am working on it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Stay tuned for more information later. Okay. Well, then we will just leave it hanging there and go right into the next question then. So from Kamel, asking about a missing disk. He says, "Hi, I've been using OpenBSD and FreeBSD for some time now, and I love BSD as a server. After watching your episodes, great, by the way, thank you." He said, "I decided to write to you for help. I encountered a problem and have no idea how to manage it. Maybe you know of a solution or hear about something similar and can help point me somewhere to resolve this case. Maybe the people who wrote the drivers for LSI can help." He said, "It starts when I was replacing my old NAS. Old NAS had 2 RAID Z, 4 hard drives each, and everything was working fine. Having a fresh new system of FreeBSD 10 release with 1 RAID Z2, which was 6 hard drives, I decided to move all disks from the old NAS to the new machine. All the Z pools was seen, all was working fine except one moved RAID Z, which was degraded. One drive was missing. System did not see the disk, and it did not appear to be in dmessage. At first, I thought maybe the disk had just died, but after checking it in another system, I see that it is seen, and it works perfectly fine. I have double-checked all the power connectors, and all are okayed for sure. My new system has 3 controllers, one onboard, which is a Supermicro motherboard, and then 2 M1015 FALSA to IT firmware 17. I have swapped disks between controllers and different connectors. The mysterious disk connected to each of those controllers on different connectors is just not seen. Other disks connected in the same place are seen and work seamlessly, so it sounds like the controller is good. I have even run new system with only system disk and the mysterious one, and the mysterious disk is not seen. I have also downloaded newer, the built-in drivers for the M1015 from LSI website. Switching to them do not change anything, and the mysterious disk is still not seen by the system. After that, I have switched back to the stock FreeBSD driver. So what can we do to make FreeBSD see the drive?" Well, this is definitely odd.
I have a quick question. Is the one that's not working going in slot number 2, counting from 0, so the 3rd slot? But I had something kind of similar. I had this server I bought off eBay, and so it had a backplane and LSI controller. Or sorry, it was the backplane, not the controller, that was the problem in mine, because I tried 2 different controllers and they both had the same problem. The expander chip, I think it was, that was in the backplane didn't like disks bigger than 2 terabytes. And I was using 3 terabyte disks. So once I plugged in more than like 2 disks or whatever, all of a sudden the disk in slot number 3, so identified as number 2 because they count from 0, would stop being visible. So I could plug in all 12 disks and just the one would not be visible. All of them would show up as the wrong size. They actually showed up as like 700 gigabytes because it would go to 2 terabytes, roll over back to 0, and then get there or whatever. But yeah, I had kind of a similar thing where one disk out of the set wouldn't show up, and it didn't matter which disk it was. It was whatever disk I put in slot number 3 would just be invisible.
Interesting.
Of course, it wasn't going to work properly anyway because the disks were seen as the wrong size because the expander chip didn't like disks over 2 terabytes, and I was using 3 terabyte disks. So I bought a bunch of 1 terabyte disks, put that machine to use, bought a new server from IX, and put all the 3 terabyte disks in that.
See, problem solved.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm wondering if you're having a similar type of issue. I don't know how your stuff is laid out or what the M1015 hardware is. I think that's the Dell version of an LSI card or something. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I've had very good luck with the LSI 92078i or whatever it's called. I got a bunch of those in my servers, a bunch of different servers too, actually, and just filled them with drives, and they were great. So I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it might be, if you're using large disks, it might be something with the backplane or with the controller card that are just not liking the big disks.
Cool.
Or it could be the firmware on the drive is just not compatible. Oftentimes when you look at the controller, you'll see they have different, they have a list of supported drives, and sometimes they don't like other drives. He didn't really mention if that one drive is identical to the other ones that he's having trouble, or is identical to the ones that are working properly, or if it's maybe a slightly different model or brand or something, and that might be the cause too.
Well, also, if anybody in the audience has run into something similar and has any other suggestions,
a nicer solution than mine, which was buy a different server.
Right. Oh, cool. Okay, well, next up is Torsten asking about getting into BSD. So he says, "Hey guys, I'm a Windows developer and a sysadmin." He said, "After a few experiments with Linux and finally switching my main machine to OS X, I learned about OS X roots, which were next step in BSD. I never found out which Linux distribution was the right one for the job, and I got tired of them all, so I decided to dig deeper into Unix land." He said, "Long story short, after surfing the web for a while and reading a lot of nice things about FreeBSD and OpenBSD, I discovered your podcast. He said, I really like your way of presenting BSD in general, and I learned a lot from the past episodes. Thank you."
Well, thank
You're
you,
welcome. He said, "I finally decided to install some VMs, FreeBSD and OpenBSD, to play with." He said, "So now that playtime is over, the VMs are working so well that I think I'd like to use them in production. So here's my questions. Number one, what would you suggest to configure, install to build a solid system base?"
Don't know what he's actually asking there. The default install of either of those OSs is very solid.
Pretty solid. So well, I guess it might relate to the next one. He asked about, would you use ZFS in a virtual machine? So maybe he's asking like how you do the install.
I do use ZFS in virtual machines, although ZFS likes having more RAM. So if you're doing virtual machines, make sure you give it at least 2 or 3 gigs of RAM. But it will work with less. It's just not as fast. Also, ZFS doesn't like to be more than about 70 or 80% full. So if you have very small disks and very small amount of RAM, you probably be better off with UFS. But especially if you just want to practice playing around with ZFS and stuff in a virtual machine, it'll be fine. Even on our bare metal servers, we don't use ZFS if the disk is not at least a terabyte.
Sure. Okay, and he says, what are you installing or configuring to monitor the health of your FreeBSD systems? He said, really, Nagios?
Well, it depends what you're doing. We use Nagios, but that's because we're monitoring like 175 hosts and like 10,000 services or something. And we're hooking it up with Nagios Graph, and we're getting graphs on like how the memory is being used, how the CPU is being used, alerting, so we can be like, hey, the server that's transcoding video is actually running out of spare CPU time, and that will cause all the videos to lag, so make sure we don't put any more people on that server and all that kind of stuff. So as far as monitoring the health of the server, somebody linked something to answer that question. I don't have it handy here. But I'll grab it. But there are a lot of tools built into the base system for monitoring stuff. GStat will look at your it uses the GOM layer, and it basically shows you the read and write speed and the number of IOPS going to your disks, which is very handy, right? And then you have things like IOStat and VMstat, top, and
I use iftop for network stuff sometimes.
And nload is also nice from ports. But yeah, all the tools to monitor things about the system while you're sitting on it are built in, and that's fine. Nagios is more for taking a step back and looking at all of your servers and the server or the monitoring system telling you when one of those servers has a problem, as opposed to checking on it while you're sitting on the machine, which I guess is the difference there.
All right, so his last question, he says, imagine a server you did not install or haven't seen before. What and where do you look to get a basic feeling of the system state in general? Well, like Alan kind of alluded to, I use the system commands, what version are we running? Or do we have all the patches installed? Run a couple package commands. Are we updated? Check through dmessage, look in var log, kind of poke around, see how things are going there.
Yeah, you definitely want to check and make sure it's up to date and they have all that.
GStat, take a look at disk usage and whatnot. It really depends on what the system was deployed to do.
Yeah, but I guess that's usually one of my biggest things is when I sit down on a Linux box, I don't know how to do the same things. I can't seem to get the same telemetry that I get out of a FreeBSD machine. And so I'm always like,
Right. But those are the places I would start.
I wish I had this.
Feel for the box.
I wish I had this image handy. I saw it like just yesterday. I was like, we need that for the show. Basically, it showed kind of like the layout of the system and all the different components, how they stack together. And it had arrows drawn to all of them and telling you which tool lets you see what's happening in that space. Have you seen that diagram before?
I have not, no.
Oh, but it's really good.
Okay.
And I had it here, and it's gone, and I don't know why.
If we can find it later, maybe we can pass it along.
I'm going to throw that in. But yes, we'll definitely tear that out. We should just do an episode one time where we just talk about all those tools. I'll have to grab that image and do that. But yes, I think actually TJ might have sent it to him in an email already. Anyway, yeah, that's the biggest thing. Is every time I have to sit down on somebody else's server, the first thing I want to do is like, all right, how's the CPU doing? How is the RAM doing? How are the disks doing? What's been happening? And the nice thing about having something like Nagios is that you have a history. You can see what the CPU usage looked like 2 days ago when everything was fine, or a graph of what it's looked like for the last month. They say, oh, everything was fine, and then suddenly on Tuesday, everything went to hell. It's like, well, what did you guys do on Tuesday? It's like, oh, we didn't think to tell you that on Tuesday we changed this, and that's ever since everything's been broken. It's like, well, there's your problem.
Okay. Well, hopefully we answered your question there. And of course, thank you for listening to the show. We appreciate that. So last up, this
hold
week
on,
is
I found
Dominic.
the picture. I found the picture.
Oh, you found it.
Yes,
Never
it
mind.
was in the email. So here, I'll drop it in the chat room too, in case Chris wants to take a look at it. But it shows, you have your applications, and they're sitting on the top, and you can, use Trust or something to see what they're doing. And they show up in top, and then you have your system live. Then you have the system call interface where you can actually see what's happening in there. And then at the VFS layer, you have fstat, which tells you about your files and so on. And then you have UFS and ZFS. For ZFS, there's ZFS-stats in the ports tree, and it has another one called ZFS Mon. Those are both very nice for ZFS Mon. Basically, it shows the change in all the different ZFS statistics every second, or every interval. So you can be like, every 10 seconds, how many more cache hits have I got? And it calculates like cache hit ratios and stuff. And that makes it very easy to get the data you need to decide how to tune your ZFS array. And then it has the GOM layer, which, obviously GStat lets you see what's going on there. And then you have your block device interface to your device drivers. Well, IOStat helps you there, and VMstat -I will tell you about the number of interrupts coming in, and maybe that'll help. PMC stat will actually get information like out of the motherboard chips. TCB dump, obviously for your Ethernet level stuff. NetStat will give you sockets and IP stats and so on. Ktrace, lockstat will tell you about locks that are holding and maybe why your CPU is being burned up all the time. And then obviously top in BSD is a lot more expressive than top in Linux.
Sure.
There are like literally 50 more switches for it. And top capital P and capital S and a bunch of other ones. It's very interesting. Systat and sysETL. There's all kinds of different diagnostic information in sysETL. A lot of drivers stick their stuff there. Like if you have an Intel network card driver, it'll tell you how many errors, like how many Ethernet frames it's got that were garbled and stuff, or how many times it tried to send something but it was out of buffers or out of descriptors and so on. Again, PMC stat can get information out of your RAM and your CPU. So you can, I've been playing with that for watching the power utilization on my laptop. It's like how much time is my CPU spending in the different C states for sleeping, right?
Sure.
ProcStat, VMstat, Systat, NetStat, anyway, and PStat. So this diagram basically shows all those different things, and the friendly reminder over at the side that dtrace can do all of it. And
dtrace is like the blowtorch.
But yeah, so this little diagram basically just shows you all the different parts of your system and which tools you can use to monitor what's happening on any one of those systems or parts of the system. Yeah, I'm glad I found that.
Okay. Well, good deal. Well, last up, Dominic now, auto installers.
Yes.
He says, hey guys, since I'm going deeper into FreeBSD the last weeks, I'm interested in how you set up your development machines for working on low-level stuff. He said, I am working on my laptop to get some things fixed. I have multiple hard drives and can change them easily. He said, since the stuff I am testing with UEFI and ZFS and the installer seems a little bit fragile with virtualization tools like VirtualBox at the moment, I test on my hardware as to have less of an impact from an additional layer like virtualization as possible. Is there something like Kickstarter or an automatic PXE install which can be configured to install with the same options over and over and over again to test things faster?
There's a Summer of Code project that was running this summer to build something like that. In particular, he mentions UEFI and ZFS. Those don't work together in FreeBSD, and they apparently will work together in PCBSD starting this weekend.
Yeah, we got an RC2 of our 10.1
Yeah.
image, which will use some newly fixed grub version to boot ZFS over UEFI and whatnot.
Yes, and
yeah,
you've given presentations at conferences about
I
your
have.
Pixie booting with a
Yeah, we have
config.
a tool called the PC Thin client, which basically will allow you to set up a deployment server, which can do Pixie booting, and then you can just have your script set up on this is how my install is supposed to look, and then you can just do it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you Google for some of my previous talks on Pixie booting PCBSD, you'll find it. There's videos of it out there.
Yep. Because there was some like an answer file system for the old sysinstall, but that wasn't that expressive. And then BSD install didn't really have much. When Devin and I wrote the ZFS parts of BSD install, we purposely made it inherit stuff from the environment so that you could basically by writing your own script that would then call BSD install, you could set a bunch of environment variables and provide a different ZFS layout or whatever, or change the name of the pool and such. And he mentored a Google Summer of Code student to expand that into covering basically the whole install. I don't know if that's finished, but there's at least something out there you could probably work with.
Yeah, I'll say
but
definitely.
I would definitely say,
PCBSD
especially
stuff,
if you're doing it on your laptop, you probably want a whole desktop, and Chris's stuff will just work.
Well, so our installer, what's kind of cool is anytime you do an install with PCBSD's graphical installation utility, or even the text installer, it's just writing a script out. It's writing a config script, which looks very similar to the old FreeBSD sysinstall. But anyway, once you have that, even at the end of the install, it gives you the option to dump that script to a USB stick, and then you can take that and deploy it on your Pixie server, and there you go. You've prototyped your installation, and then you can just deploy it as much as you want over Pixie. So yeah, take a look into our wiki page for docs on that, and I have some previous talks from other years, I think a couple years ago
videos,
now.
Yeah.
With videos and stuff.
Because the best part about that setup is that you can just fire up a VirtualBox, do the install the way you want, and then have a config file, rather than having to sit there and write a config file and then try it and see if it works. Instead, you do the install, you click all the buttons you want, set it up exactly how you want, and you get a text file. You can still modify that if you want, but you don't have to try to write it from scratch.
It's a lot easier to prototype it that way, though, especially when you're doing like disk layouts and ZFS data sets and whatnot.
You don't have to write the config from scratch.
Yeah, just a couple of clicks and you can change your options and whatnot. And then you have the config file. And when you look at it like in VI or some other editor, it's like, oh, okay, I just want to tweak this or change that. It's a lot simpler that way. So yeah, hopefully that helps you out there, Dominic. Okay, well, I guess we're going to go right into our next segment then, Alan. So I'll let you kick this one off here about our mailing list gold for the week. Well, we'll go to the next one. The next one I think makes a little more sense. So it's a CVS commit. Looks like, what is this, from NetBSD.
Yes.
And it looks like in source, log message, remove a reference to a 14-year-old IP address for ftp.netbsd.org. This is not a joke.
Yeah, so it looks like they modified the files for the notes for the NVMe68K, which is an old-fashioned type of processor. And in the notes, it basically had an IP address instead of the DNS ftp.netbsd.org, telling you go there to download the source code or whatever. And because it was an old platform that people don't use very often, in a notes file that people don't read very often, it just sat there until, a week ago. And somebody's like, yeah, that's been there for 14 years and it's not correct. If you go to that IP address, there's no NetBSD FTP server there.
Sure. Okay, let's see. Next hilarious. Up. Oh, good. It is. Next thing is called Is This Thing On? Yes. I'll let you read this one. This one's pretty good.
Yeah, so somebody writes in and says, one application that I'm importing needs to know the power supply information from the system. So we thought using sysctl in the ACPI interface would be the simplest and most elegant way. But he found out that information on the power supply is not available on... It's only available on laptops, while on desktop machines it doesn't apply. So according to man ACPI, the hw.acpi.ac line OID in sysctl tells you the AC line status, so I guess desktop should always return 1, but there's no such OUID on a desktop. And that's actually because the ACPI doesn't expose it because of what we'll get to. He says, that is definitely a feature. So the guy that had the problem says, is this a bug or a feature? And the response from the mailing list is that this is definitely a feature. The absence of this OUID is a sure way to tell if the machine you're talking to, which might be remote, so you might not know, is actually hard powered, right? It's got a hard line basically, when it's not a laptop, it's never, if the machine isn't connected to AC line to get power, then it's probably off. And that's a very good indicator.
Yes.
So mostly it doesn't have that OAUD because generally it's not possible to power a regular system off a battery built in. You know, a UPS is a separate appliance, and that's it. So sure. How can I tell the power source on this FreeBSD whether it's AC battery or UPS or whatever? For that, the UPS has their own drivers and kind of exposes it slightly differently. And so it kind of becomes a slightly more complicated case. A lot of that has to do with the fact that UPSs aren't part of the ACPI standard, and each UPS, different brand or whatever, will have its own separate drivers, and that's quite a bit different. But like you said, specifically, so this is an AC-powered machine, and it is most certainly on, right? Just if the ACPI sub OID there doesn't exist, that means that it's a machine with a power supply that is either on or off. And if it's off, you don't need a sysctl to tell you that it's off. And he says, perhaps what you need is to fit one of these machines with a DED, which is a dark emitting diode as opposed to a light emitting diode.
Nice.
And it's this technology used exclusively by the CIA for clandestine equipment, also popular in the as a power off indicator. You could also add a DDR or a dark dependent resistor circuit to ring a bell whenever the DED is emitting darkness, just to be sure it is really off. You should probably avoid using the new super dark DEDs, or you may find your room plugged into impenetrable darkness whenever the power goes off. Seriously, for a moment, if you do have a UPS, you'll need to integrate the UPS software, which varies with different brands of UPS and so on, and won't be integrated with the BIOS and ACPI.
Nice. Well, that was a good one.
Yes, somebody took some time to answer that guy's question.
Definitely.
And to make it humorous.
Well, cool. That's fantastic.
So the important thing there is they actually did answer his question after having some fun.
Yes. And of course, if you guys find more of those throughout the week, send them in. We'll have TJ will take a look at them and see if we can put them in a future show notes. So, okay, as we close the show this week, of course, we got to mention a couple things. All our tutorials will be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv, so check them out. All the old ones are still there and relevant. The OpenBSD router tutorial, the DPD, and PXE auto install and patched ISO building tutorials have been updated for 5.6 as well.
Yes, so
cool.
Like I mentioned PXE installs, we have a tutorial on how to do it with OpenBSD. And as Chris said, you can find him giving talks at AsiaBSDCon, BSDCan,
BSDCan, Euro, etc.
Well, I think the videos from that Euro are missing.
Probably didn't make it up, yeah. But yeah, AsiaBSDCon, I'm pretty sure is up.
Yes, and BSDCans are definitely up. The AsiaBSDCon one has video of you in the screen. The BSDCan one is higher definition video of just your slides.
Just the screen.
And your demo, cool. Right? Because they record what gets sent to the projector as opposed to using a camera for BSDCan. And so you can, whichever one you prefer.
Okay, well, cool. And of course, you can always send your questions, comments, or ideas, topics, or stories you want to hear mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll be happy to include them in a future episode. Also, let us know how we're doing or what you'd like to see change in future episodes. It's always good to get ideas. And you can usually watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC, but we're going to be in California next week for Meet BSD. We'll actually be flying back
on the Wednesday, right?
We'll normally be doing the show, yeah. So we're going to have a pre-recorded episode for next week, which you'll still want to check out. We'll have an exciting interview for that.
Yes, and also we're hoping to do some live streaming over the course of Saturday and Sunday from the event as well. So
watch our Twitter.
Watch our Twitter and the website, and we'll let you know whenever we can manage to squeeze some video out for you. It sounds like the internet there is going to be a little limited, so I don't know how much we'll be able to do.
So we'll see how that works, but hopefully we'll get something. We'll definitely at least get some new interviews recorded.
And there will be an episode next week. We're going to record that in a couple of minutes here.
Okay. So while we're talking about conferences, the OperatingSystems.io event has gotten a few more BSD speakers. So you'll want to check that out if you're in the London area, Europe, and you can make it out on November 25th.
Yes,
so that's
I think that's actually organized by a NetBSD developer who we interviewed at EuroBSDCon, but we haven't shown that interview yet. And he asked if we would put a mention out for this. So if you're in the UK or would like or can get there The OperatingSystems.io conference is November 25th.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Check that out. Well, cool. Thank you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing some of you guys live and in person this weekend out at Meet BSD. And we'll have fun and be back in a couple weeks. Yes, definitely come say hi. So thanks for being with us, you guys.